Hi, thanks for coming out and thanks for having me. So I've noticed some common points of friction for getting software into users' hands. First of all, making something today means committing to paying for infrastructure indefinitely. Otherwise, your users' data and any connections they made get destroyed. Systems and users need to be always online, and any downtime or connectivity issues end up being catastrophic for usability. Making software is complex, with a separation between backends making massive systems scalable and front-end developers trying to adapt APIs to work on all these different UI libraries. Making software is one thing, but actually getting it into people's hands means making a business account and a deployment pipeline for every single app store you want to deploy to. And these factors work together to keep software expensive and complex to create. It forces creators to focus on profit over usability and utility, and it determines what may exist and for how long. As well, any data your users have becomes your liability. As an operator, you're required to facilitate censorship, copyright takedowns, and to follow laws regulating in any country that you want to operate within. And the more data you have and the more successful you become, the more of a target you become for hacking and exploitation. Oh, bonk. I think the state of things kind of sucks, and I have a dream of changing it so that creating something means you don't need to deal with any infrastructure, you don't need to deal with any build systems if you don't want to, and you can self-publish and distribute your software without having to jump a bunch of hoops and a bunch of platform-specific nonsense. So this is a dream that's been guiding my work on Agregore the past 5 years, and I wanted to go over a timeline of how this dream shaped the project over time and what decisions I made based on my ideals. So this dream was actually sparked way before I started doing peer-to-peer software professionally, by the work of Paul Frazee and Tara Vansel on the Beaker browser. When I came across this project, it literally blew my mind that a browser could be not just a tool for interacting with clouds, but a tool for creation in and of itself. So in June of 2018, I did my first presentation about the peer-to-peer web at a local meetup in my hometown of Ottawa, Canada. So sadly, people didn't seem to want to install another browser and expected this stuff to just work in regular browsers like Chrome or Firefox. And this led me to look at how we could get peer-to-peer web APIs into browsers through gateways, WebSocket proxies, and combine them with browser-to-browser WebRTC connections. In May 2019, I did my first international presentation here in Berlin at Data Terra Nemo about what I then called DatWeb. The idea was that the functionality of Beaker, that you could get the functionality of Beaker in a regular web browser by polyfilling everything with a single JavaScript API. So I deployed it, it kind of worked, but I ran into the limitations of the web really quickly. The main thing is that even though we could get peer-to-peer archives loading through gateways, we couldn't really share those archives between origins due to cross-origin restrictions. And we weren't able to get peer-to-peer URLs absolutely everywhere because the web just didn't give us the ability to register new URL schemes. And so even though it was great, it wasn't perfect. Then in March 2020, I started working for Wapikani Mobile on an app called Natakanu. They'd be traveling around indigenous communities in Canada, showcasing and creating media, and wanted a tool to share files when the internet was unavailable. So we built a peer-to-peer file transfer app using Electron that would automatically find devices on the local network and share files in multi-writer folders. And part of this, I learned that it's actually really easy to do custom protocol handler stuff in Electron, unlike every other UI framework. And I even managed to reuse a bunch of my code of exploring DAT on the web in Electron. So this was kind of the thing that inspired me to think about making my own browser and seeing how far I could get it. So a few months later, I did the first release of the DWeb browser, and a couple of days later, I renamed it to Agregore, so that I could have something like actually searchable. A few days after that, I got my first contribution from Metanomial from the DAC community who added context menus. So right from the beginning of the browser, I wanted to work out in the open and make it easy for people to contribute small changes without having to deal with like custom build systems and like complex code bases. Or I didn't want to put people behind a CLA. So in July of 2020, I released a version with my foundational concept for how to treat protocol handlers on the web. Instead of treating peer-to-peer URLs as something you could only get from, I added the ability to use other verbs like put or post to write back into peer-to-peer URLs. So instead of needing custom JavaScript APIs for every protocol's SDK, we could use the web metaphor and the built-in fetch APIs that developers are already using to work with information outside of the local machine. And this is great because the HTTP metaphor applies across a bunch of different data transfer protocols. So the next month, I actually added my first additional protocol, which is Gemini. It's kind of like a simplified web where the connections are just TLS and the markup and requests only do the bare minimal that you need to actually render stuff and make it hard to add tracking and other anti-features. It's not exactly peer-to-peer, but the indie nature and the easy-to-get-started nature of it fit in with the project really well. I also added an ad blocker extension at this point, partly as a way to showcase that you can extend the browser without having to like dive in Electron and self-compile everything, but also as a way to make the web more pleasant to use, because ads end up using up a lot of bandwidth, taking a lot of attention, and it's just a lot nicer without them. So in October, I landed support for the second peer-to-peer protocol, which was IPFS. Protocol Labs has been a huge help in progressing the DWeb movement, and it was an obvious choice. So the HTTP metaphor was also perfect here because they were already deployed to gateways and other browsers, and adding it meant that Agregore could load all of the content that was already on IPFS. A little while after that, I added support for BitTorrent. I'd say that BitTorrent is the most successful peer-to-peer protocol in use right now. People all over the world are using it to share large files like Linux ISOs and bigbuckbunny.mov renders. And with the addition of this protocol handler, all torrents now became websites that you could just load in a browser and explore like you could any other site. This also meant like all data was now available to the peer-to-peer web, which was nice. And also you could create new torrents the same way you could hypercore or IPFS things. So one difficult thing is if you want decentralized identifiers, you need to make them either secure or human meaningful. And in my opinion, security is non-negotiable. So you basically have to either use a hash or a public key to identify a data set. This absolutely sucks for trying to share a link between people who are like physically next to each other. And so I added a built-in QR code extension where you could generate a code for a site and then scan someone else's code to open it in a new window. And so I actually use this to this day when I do workshops on local networks so that after people created something, they can quickly load it in each other's machines over the network without having to like send it through email or something horrible, like dictating 64 characters. In May 2022, thanks to a grant from the Filecoin Foundation, we got to create what, to my knowledge, is the first mobile web browser with native peer-to-peer protocol handlers and a local node. So this was a really important milestone because most people are using mobile OSs to actually like interact with information. And so supporting Android opened the door to everyone with a tablet or a phone being able to participate and access and author content just like anyone else. Sadly, due to time constraints, we were only really able to add IPFS support, and it's been a lot harder to customize Chromium compared to slapping together some Electron support. But regardless, I think it's a win, and I actually daily drive this and use it on all my Android devices to this day. So besides the browser itself, I really loved Beaker's documentation. And in 2023, thanks to a grant from the Filecoin Foundation, we got to catch up a bit with a series of example apps and tutorials for making those apps. So now newcomers to Agregore can experiment with the drag and drop uploads, but also learn how to make their own apps and build stuff without having to install a bunch of SDKs. So in April of that year, thanks to a grant from FFDW, we released a new version of Distributed Press, which is a tool for publishing static websites to different peer-to-peer protocols. Agregore was nice for tinkering with apps and loading content, but it wasn't obvious how existing website authors could add peer-to-peer capabilities to their content publishing. And so with Distributed Press, it became easy because they have GitHub Actions and a CLI, which let you push things to the peer-to-peer web without having to mess with running your own nodes. And so this has been a really great tool as a publishing side to Agregore's consumption and app creation side. And there's a public instance run by Haifa, but I also started running my own instance to dog food the tool and use it for all the various Agregore websites I've been publishing. So AI and large language models have been exploding in popularity, as we all know. And in 2024, I started experimenting with using local models for generating code and just seeing what their capabilities are. And so these days, you can get 7B models to spit out runnable code without needing to boil the ocean or even have a particularly powerful GPU rig. I exposed a new API for peer-to-peer web apps to use language model inference using models that are controlled by the user, so that apps, they just call .chat or .complete, and the user decides which model that is, whether it's local or OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever else. And so in September 2024, I did a presentation at a local AI meetup where I showed how we can use local app generation, which also publishes these apps directly to the peer-to-peer web and makes it easy to vibe code and self-publish without needing to rely on any extra infrastructure. I'm also planning to adapt this to teach the app generator how to use peer-to-peer APIs. So potentially you could generate like a fully local first, offline first, mesh first app just by like typing some vague ideas in a box, maybe. So most recently, I've been spending more time on authoring tools. I released a new editor that's kind of like JS Fiddle or CodePen. So it takes HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and composes it in a single file and publishes it to a variety of peer-to-peer protocols. But it can also take any published file and then extract those things back out. And so what's cool is this works great on mobile too. So actually, after I made this tool, I loaded it on my phone and noticed that it wasn't looking quite right. So I opened the editor within itself and messed with the styles and content until it looked like something I really wanted. And then I self-published a new version from my phone. And now I have that offline forever if I want to edit anything else. So this has been nice to enable people to quickly tinker with things. And I'm planning to integrate it with all of the tutorials and all of the AI-generated apps as well. So I just quickly wanted to give a shout out to all of these people that helped out with the project on GitHub. Y'all are amazing, and thank you for existing. And yeah, so that's kind of where we've been at so far. The big thing I'm working on next is updating Agregore Mobile with a new peer-to-peer protocol using the pairs ecosystem. And I'm tinkering with the app generator to make it more reliable and to work on lower-end systems and to add the peer-to-peer protocols. And I'm also collaborating with my colleague Akilesh, who works on the PeerSkype browser, on a standard for peer-to-peer extension distribution so we can author and share extensions between our browsers. So at the end of all this, I hope we can skip expensive cloud-first software and instead have off-grid software kits that let us not only consume, but also create information technology without needing to deal with the constraints of the centralized web. Thank you.